Hi everybody and welcome to the Breatharian Institute. My name is Brandon and I wanted to begin to open up a package of information for everyone today involving the inner child. Now, to do this, I have a very powerful technique that it's going to take me a little while to kind of frame in this technique, but I want to fit it into this short video, the actual technique that will save you decades of inner child work. Now, I don't even know if I've ever asked this before, but if you could please, if you get information out of this video that you find valuable, please share it, like it, most importantly, please share it. Because I really want to see this go somewhere and really change people's lives. So, inner child work, I was doing inner child work actively since about the year 2000. It could have been 99, but it was definitely by 2000 I was doing strong inner child work. And before the year 2000, I went on a vision quest in 1997, and that lasted about a year. And before then, I was born in 1977, and I never left my inner child as a child until I was about 8 years old. And at the age of 8, I had to sort of recede back into my consciousness because life was just too painful. So I spent a very short amount of time away from my inner child, you could say. So this isn't, it's not a body for me that really needed a whole lot of repair. But I noticed that when I started doing inner child work, coming into my adulthood, how constant and frequent the inner child work was, of like me apologizing to my inner child, like sorry for leaving you or whatever, and like hugging it, and I spent years doing this kind of thing. And really doing the what everybody knows as inner child work, bonding, communicating, dialogue with the inner child, asking the inner child what it needs. And just to backtrack a little bit, let's go into for a moment, what is the inner child? So the inner child is a body within us that contains our original energy. I call it like our original DNA, spiritual DNA template is within the inner child. Now, one thing that's most often looked over within the inner child work community is, I think a lot of people see the inner child as being weak and needy and needing love and nurturing. Like, this is a body. I'm what I call an inner child communicator. So I do a group of things for other people's inner child. Like I can find a stuffed animal. Hit me up, DM me if you want this. I can find stuffed animals that match your particular inner child's energy, and to where I'll go into this later, but basically, if you can find objects in the outer world that match the specific energy of your inner child in the inner world, it will help your inner child to dominate the physical reality. It's a thing of matching frequencies and harmony. It has to do with harmony. So I don't want to go too far in any direction on this, because I want to make this a pretty short video. But basically, I've communicated with people's inner child who are older people, and it literally looks like their inner child hasn't had a bite to eat in 40 years, 50 years, and there it is. It might be weak, but it's still there, and it's still alive, and it's still a body of power. And that's really what I want to remind everyone of with this inner child work. This is a being of power. Like, this is somebody that, like, if you didn't eat for 20 years, would you still be alive? Like, probably not, so this is a being, this is a place of power within us. It's not some weak body that needs to be nurtured and coddled and apologized to and all of that stuff. So I advise everybody to really, apologize to your inner child if you left it. Make things right, if you will, and then move on, because your inner child doesn't need a bunch of like coddling and all of this kind of thing. So here's what I found. I wanted to kind of lay that out in the beginning. What I found as far as inner child work goes, and a lot of people say that like beneath the heart, like once you move up into the heart, there is a type of congruence in the life. Well, beneath your heart center, okay, let me just backtrack for one more moment. I found that there are primarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 primary power centers in the body. So the first is right above the head. It's the house of the higher self, or the higher self. The second one is in the thymus region, and this is the sacred heart. The third one is it's in a region in the heart, and that's actually to the left side of the body, and that's where God comes into the body, into the heart. There's a particular spot, it's like almost the size of a pea, where God enters into the body, or entered into the body. And beneath these 3 major power centers, there are 2 major power centers. One is the ego, or the divine ego, and that's located in the spleen area. Like the ego might run throughout the body, but its home is in the spleen, so you can always contact it by phoning home. Okay, so that's in the spleen. The spleen is right up underneath the lower part of the left rib cage. Okay, and then beneath that is the inner child, and most people's inner child is, unless your inner child is very strong, it'll be located below the belly button. If your inner child is quite empowered, it'll be right in the belly button region. And as you really begin to do inner child work, like really empowering the inner child, it'll rise up above the belly button. So let's get one thing clear here before we move forward, because this is a technique. Okay, so we need to be very scientific. Now, what is the ego? So the ego is a survivor. It's part of us that was born with us. If anybody ever tells you that they're going to destroy the ego, or that you should destroy the ego, they're full of garbage. Like, they don't know what they're talking about, because an ego is what keeps us surviving every day. It's what says, no, you need to, step up these steps, put one foot in front of the other up these stairs so that you don't fall over and, break your neck. It's the thing that'll make you aware of, cars, traffic, any danger, physical danger. Okay, so I won't get into wetico or possession right now, but I'll just say that it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any scientific sense if something is here to help you to survive, that it's going to ruin relationships, in the way that everybody blames the ego for all these things. Oh, is my ego driving me to do this or do that? No, it's not. These have to do with foreign consciousnesses, parasites. The New Age community says, and the Jungian doctrine is basically like integrate your shadow. And look at where that's led us now. Look at where modern psychology has led us now. You're not supposed to integrate something that's foreign to you. So we have basically like energetic mind parasites, and all of these kind of things going on right now, which are not the ego, okay? And I just wanted to point that out. We can get into that in a later video, but I wanted to point out that it doesn't even make any sense, people. Like, it doesn't make any sense that something came with us and meant for physical survival would wreak so much havoc in our lives. So when I talk about the ego, I'm talking about a divine, sacred body that, when I talk to my ego, I'm like, hey, my super special ego, especially in the beginning, I'm like, my friend, my protector. Thank you so much, So this is a distinction that you need to make, is to really do inner child work. You must distinguish that the ego is not the enemy. The ego is a friend. The ego when you, the master, the original one who you are, had to recede back into your consciousness because of trauma and life being too painful as a child for you to remain your one perfect self that the Creator created, when you had to go back and like recede back into your consciousness, that at that point the ego had to take over. Now, before then, the ego was only meant to take over whenever you were in physical danger. Okay? So the problem with blaming the ego for everything is like, yes, the ego is a little mad, okay? But imagine if you were supposed to go to work for one shift, and you ended up having to work day and night for 20 years. You know what I mean? Like you thought you were going to clock in that day and get to go home and take a rest. And instead, everybody in the work left and your boss left and you had to run a factory by yourself. That's basically what the ego's like. The ego is a little mad because, like, insane, because it's had to stay in control this whole time because you, the master, left. Okay? So none of this is to blame or anything like this. It's just about who is the master. You are, and it's time to take control of your ship. And that's what this is really all about. So the way to really, so what I was saying about the bodies beneath the heart is that there's a battle going on for consciousness, for awareness, for space beneath the heart. And that has to do with the ego, or the divine ego, and the inner child. Okay? So the way to give the inner child all the space that it needs in your abdominal cavity, in your air, your first brain, or whatever you want to call that area down there, in order to give your inner child the space that it needs, which is really what it needs, is space, you have to nurture the ego. Now, this will knock decades off of inner child work. That's why I'm asking people to please share this video, because if anybody's interested in inner child work, this will save you so much time, okay? And it took me decades to get here to learn this thing, and I'm like, oh my God, I could have done decades worth of inner child month and inner child work in a couple of months, and if I was really ready, it could have been a couple of weeks or a couple of hours. So here is how to do the inner child work. You take one hand and put it on the spleen, over the spleen, and you begin to dialogue with the ego. And opening dialogue with the ego is like, it's like, dear, precious, special ego. Dear, like not dear like in a letter, but like my dear friend, my dear, ally. Thank you so much for keeping me safe all this time. I really appreciate you. I know that you had to do something that was that should have never been done. It should have never been. I should have never had to ask you or you to feel like you had to stay in control for this long. Now the master's home. You can relax. There's no danger. Like, look around you. There's no danger. There's no airplane falling out of the sky. If there is any danger, I want to hear about it from you, because I know you'll know, because you're that freaking awesome. My little special ego, you're that awesome that I know that you'll know, and I'm listening. If there's any danger, I'm listening. But if there's not any danger, and there's no danger right now, I need you to be quiet. I need you to sit there and relax. Relax, little ego. I'm here now. The master's home. I'm taking control. So you just sit there and relax. And if I'm not in any physical danger, I need you to be quiet. And this is how to talk to the ego. I need you to sit there and be quiet. Okay? And what this will do is you'll feel a deep relaxation. Remember, put your hand over the ego. You're not talking over the spleen. You're not talking to some nebulous out there anything. This will get your spleen and your ego to relax, okay? And it will feel super chill. when I get to talking to my ego and I feel that the ego is like out of control and panicked, it feels like it curls up on my lap and starts to purr like a cat. Like I can literally feel this humming like a purr coming from the ego. And so when you do that, your inner child, like, so your inner child would have all the space in the abdominal cavity to grow naturally. Now, I don't know if I said this earlier, but you can go in and apologize to the inner child. You can nurture the inner child. You can welcome the inner child. But if you don't relax the ego, you're always going to be doing that over and over again. You're always going to be trying to do stupid things because, oh, my inner child likes it, or my inner child likes this or likes that. When you know, you really don't know what your inner child likes or whatever like that, because the inner child is not even really like that. Like when I look for, fun things that my inner child likes, like I'll find certain little ice creams or something like this, but it's always like vanilla, it's never anything like super duper fun. It might be a strawberry ice cream or something like this, but mostly it's about providing your inner child with the space to dominate that area down there, the abdominal area, the solar plexus, okay? And this is about it. I'm going to sit here and think for a minute, is there anything else I need to add? But, if you just nurture your ego, the home of your ego, and you tell this divine body and you stop blaming every damn thing, if you're in an altered space, chances are, if you're not the one original one that the Creator created, who you were in the beginning, who your mother got to see in the beginning, if you're not that being, then you're probably in an altar anyway. And this has more to do with possession than the ego, and we can get into all that later. But the most important thing is for you to stop blaming the ego for your problems. You know what I mean? Come take your rightful place as the master and stop blaming the ego for, the ego doesn't want anything other than your personal survival. And other than that, like if it's wanting something other than your physical survival, and it's truly the ego, it's because the master has not been home, and the master needs to come and take control of the situation, and that's you, and that's what you need to do. So the ego needs to stop being the whipping boy of the conscious community. It has not done anything wrong, okay? So, yeah, that's it. That's the technique. You nurture the ego, you put one hand on the ego. Not really two hands. It's a known thing for people who divine, to find answers, that like if you put one hand on over your third eye, you can become more like psychic. That's why I spend a lot of times meditating like this. But if you put two hands over your third eye, it basically nullifies everything. It's a neutralizing and energetic magnetic, phenomenon that basically will numb things out. Put one hand on the ego. Nurture your ego. Talk to it like it's a dear friend because it kept your butt alive all this time. Stop blaming anything on the ego, and nothing is the ego's fault. Talk it down. Nurture the ego. Get the ego to let go of control. It only had to stay in control because you weren't there. Okay, and it kept you alive all this time. So express gratitude toward the ego, and then the inner child will naturally have the space that it needs to survive. Okay, that it needs to thrive. So talk to the inner child, yes, but in a way, keep it short and sweet, because the ego is the inner child is a power center. It is power, raw DNA, spiritual DNA template. The one who the Creator created. All that information is in the inner child. So, definitely stay updated. Stay with us at the Institute, and I'll fill in information as this thing goes along. We'll go more into the possession thing and how to remove these things as we go along. And all the best to everyone. Thank you so much for bearing with me through this video. I know it was rich, and hopefully it gave you everything you need. You do this technique and it'll bring your inner child work to a new level immediately. Okay, please share this to practitioners and everyone who would need to listen to it. Thank you so much.